So I imagine everyone just comes up to you and tells you how much they love Abbott Elementary. So I'm gonna do the same thing to you, and just gush at you for 15 minutes. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. Congratulations on all the nominations. It was very, very satisfying.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I guess the first question I wanted to ask, I know it's generic, you may have been asked this before, but I sort of wanted to know what has been your personal favorite thing about sort of the meteoric rise of the show, just because, like, I've heard people call it like the little show that could. I don't know if it's because it's from like a network and it's not a streaming thing. I don't know, but I think that not a week goes by when I don't hear at least two or three people like, you write about TV. Have you heard of Abbott Elementary? And I was like, everyone has heard of Abbott Elementary.
I mean, I think that's kind of like the first thing is like, we've been working in this business since 2009.
Mhm.
And every time I'm anywhere and somebody's like, what do you do? And I say, oh, I'm a TV writer.
Mhm.
And then they always go, what's some you've written for? And I'm like, I'm going to say a bunch of names of shows. You're not going to have heard of any of them. And they're like, no, try me. I watch
Yeah.
TV. And then I say all the shows and no one's heard of any of them. And that's been my experience for the last, 14 years. And then with Abbott, this is the first time that I've like had people say, hey, I think I saw your name in the credits of the show that I'm watching. And so that just in and of itself has been wild, especially in a world where it's like there are 5 million shows on TV. The fact that people have seen it, that's the first biggest difference.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Like every show has like merch, right? Like the show gift is usually like a hoodie or something. And I wore it out one day and it was like so many people stopped me in the street, which is so like I've never experienced it like that. Like Justin said, it's crazy. It's like everybody, it seems to bring a lot of people joy, which is pretty cool. The craziest interaction that I actually had was with a security guard at Warner Brothers. Who recognized my name from the show and then was like, what do you do on it? I was like, oh, I'm like executive producer, writer on it. And she goes, can I touch you?
I was in the car for that.
Naturally, I extended my hand so that she could touch me.
You just like slowly roll the window up. That's all.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was pretty wild. It seems like it has a really positive effect on people's lives.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's
cool.
great.
Cool.
Patrick, before you jumped on, Justin and I were talking very briefly about how much we love Janelle James. And I had the pleasure of speaking with her yesterday. And then I started thinking about, this cast. This is a great ensemble cast, and I do want to talk about ensemble television in a bit, but I sort of wanted to ask from both of you the perspective of like the casting process, because everyone comes from different backgrounds. The minute that I saw Sheryl Lee Ralph, I literally screamed just because she's a legend. And like Tyler James I feel like I've seen him my entire life. Quinta Brunson, as soon as I saw him Black Lady Sketch Show, and when I found out, when I made the sort of connection in my head, I was a little bit floored. But I think with someone like Janelle James, who has that innate ability to sort of just come in, she could, burp, and I would think it's the greatest thing in the whole world. I want to maybe tell me generally about like how fun the casting process was, and then maybe, having such a find like her, because I think she is a real discovery this season.
Yeah. I mean, I think like, casting is, 95% of the battle in television. And it's oftentimes hard. It's oftentimes it begets like countless discussions with the studio and the network, and Abbott, like, kind of, I think it's fair to say, just came together so quickly, and the everybody that we really wanted for the role we got. and I've never experienced that before. Obviously like Quinta was like already there. She was like the mainstay, like we knew that she was going to be like number one on the call sheet, and I think she is magnetic. I think that's very fair to say, and I think people just when actors sit down with her to potentially if she's trying to court somebody like Cheryl or Tyler, like they just kind of immediately fall in love with her and her idea for the show. So yeah, it, like in terms of like attracting people like Cheryl and Tyler and Lisa, who are like these very experienced actors who are oftentimes hard to get for stuff. It was a strangely easy process, and I think that's credit to Quinta and the material. And then with like Janelle, she just like walked in. I was unfamiliar. I think Quinta knew her work maybe from stand-up. We knew she had written a little bit on Black Monday, and she came in. I did not recognize her from anything when she read, and it was all middle of pandemic, so we weren't live. We were watching people's tapes. She walked in and it was like, oh, this is the person. This is the person. And how are we going to convince the studio or the network to go with this kind of like untested person? And then they saw the audition and it was like, oh yeah, this is the person. So it was crazy easy. I don't know if you think all that's accurate, Justin?
Yeah, no, definitely. I remember a moment during the pilot when Janelle like came up to us and she was like, I don't even do this. We were like, what is this? What are you referring to? She's just like, acting. I don't even do this. I was like, well, you're doing it now. So, but she just has this really, I think the thing that was so great about Janelle is like a lot of people came in and read for Ava, and it kind of felt like they would come in and they'd put on the Ava suit and then they'd perform, like you could tell it wasn't coming. And then, but Janelle, she just came in and she was Ava. I mean, and she will tell you that she is very similar to Ava in her real life. Like this is, I mean, she's the sweetest, awesomest person. We love her. But that is like the energy that Ava brings is the energy Janelle can bring, just in her. Like if you're around Janelle when you're just like, if you're hanging out with her for any extended period of time, she'll just start roasting you. Like she just like, that's what she does.
What an honor. Like, oh my God.
Yeah. No, she's just like that's who she is. And so I think it was just like such sort of like a perfect person for this perfect role for her.
Yeah, it's been really fun to see her kind of coping with this like awards recognition, because I don't think she knows quite what to do with it yet. And like she's still, I mean, you probably got that yesterday. Like I don't think she's processed it fully yet. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, the thing about her in the show, like as the character, like I think it's really funny that a lot of people are I think they assume with a show, any show, a sitcom, they expect like a character to change, or they want them to maybe like learn something. But like as we see in her submitted episode where she we get to see a different side of her that she doesn't elect to show people all the time. And that was a really beautiful moment. And the funny thing that she told me, she was like, everybody tells me that Ava's their favorite character, so why do you want her to change? And I was like, you're right. I don't know why we just sort of like force that not like opinion, but we sort of like present that opinion a lot. And I saw like an article when I was doing some research before I talked to her. I think it was in the fall where the headline was something like, please let Ava remain terrible, like just please, because it's hilarious. And I was like, you're right, that's why we love her, and that's why she's so funny, because she gets to do stuff that we don't feel that we sort of have the balls to do. So
yeah, I mean, I think she's like a lovable, I mean, she's like, we love her, but I think it's fair to say that she's kind of like the recurring antagonist in the show for our characters. And it's like, yeah, like that's the trope, right? Is that antagonists like barely ever change. So yeah. I think you're going to be seeing classic Ava for a long time, hopefully.
Wonderful. I love all of
that.
Yeah,
I mean, our sort of feeling is like, it's hard to change as you get older, like it's really hard to change behavior. It's hard to change the way you think about things. And one of the things we always talk about at Abbott is that like growth for all these characters is very, very slow. And for some of them, it's impossible. Right. And I think like, especially Ava is that character where I don't think you're going to see her change as much as you'll see parts of her life you haven't seen before, which will give you a fuller understanding of her as a human being. But I don't think we're ever going to see Ava suddenly be like altruistic or you know, she's suddenly thinking about oh my God, this experience with these kids has changed me. You know, I think it's just like, you know, that we talked a lot about that story that with her and her grandma. And our point was sort of like, yeah, people have a lot of different sides of them that you don't see, especially when you're at work, you know? And so this is just another one of those sides of Ava's character, you know?
Yeah. God forbid. Like, I think a lot of people, a lot of audiences, and about television in general, I feel like there is sort of like a I call it gimme culture, whether it's about like, I want another season of this, even though the story is concluded right away, or they like, I need to know more of every single aspect of a character. And I was like, no, you don't, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I did want to ask you guys about ensemble comedy. I think everyone's probably sick and tired of hearing me say this, but I feel like we are sort of living through a golden age of ensemble network comedy, with stuff like Ghosts, with Superstore. I feel like Abbott Elementary really is sort of leading the charge with that. American Auto is another example of that. I was just curious if you guys are sort of aware of that. Is that something maybe you guys agree with, disagree with? And do you sort of hope that maybe in the conversation of streaming versus network, is that something that can be pushed forward a little bit more?
I think one of the things that's interesting about it is like, I think there was a period of TV, and we're still kind of in it, but I think we're starting to come out of it, where in order to get something sold and bought and on the air and a pilot made, you know, you had to come in with a big package, right, of actors. You had to have some big actor who was like, oh, we have, you know, Jason Segel, we have so-and-so, and they're going to be the lead of the show. And when you do that, it doesn't mean you can't make a good show, but what it means is that's number one on the call sheet, and everybody kind of filters down from that, right? And for a while, because it was so hard to kind of, even though it seems like there's a million shows on the air, it was hard to get something on the air if you didn't have a big actor attached to it, right? Or a giant showrunner behind it. And so I think that has started to sort of fade away in terms of you still need to bring in a big package to get something made. But I think it's starting to fade a little bit in terms of like, we need this one actor and then everything will drift from there. And so I think what you're starting to see is like, I mean, Quinta, she said this before, like when she came to us with this show, she was like, I'll be like fourth on the call sheet in this show. The show will be about Barbara. Like that Barbara's character will be the lead of the show. And Pat and I were like, no, you need to be the lead. You need to be the lead of the show. We can make it an ensemble, you know? But that was always Quinta's goal, was to make it an ensemble because she loves ensemble comedies. That's what she wanted to make, you know? And we wanted to help her make that. But I think that is not always how a lot of people think. Quinta's also a really sort of unusual actor in that, and this is, I would say this for our whole cast, actually, none of them really care who's getting the most lines. Like none of them give a shit. They just want the scene to be good. They're all sort of like those types of actors who they just want to like, they understand all the things that are necessary to make a really great scene. And they know, even if I'm not saying anything in this moment, they can cut to a look of me, or they can do this. And they're all very aware of what is happening within the scene. And so it's this really unique and amazing experience for us where none of them give a shit about who has the most lines, who has the most jokes, who has the blow to the scene. And that is not common. A lot of times on shows, you'll hear it if they're not getting what they want. And so I think that's one of the beautiful things about this ensemble, that it's just like a bunch of people who are all wanting this thing to work. They all know their role in each scene.
Yeah. I also just think that like ensembles make for the best broadcast shows, because in success, you're doing 22 of them. And it's like, you need that many characters to be able to continue to tell fresh stories over the course of 22 episodes. So, fortunately we have 6 and now 7 series regulars with the addition of William Stanford Davis, Mr. Johnson, to series regular that we can go to, in any given episode. And so, it gives the show much needed legs for doing those sort of, marathon 22 episode seasons.
Well, the thing that I think is a difference with like Abbott and like maybe some other comedies or shows, and I've said this when I had the pleasure of speaking with some of the actors from Abbott, is that as an audience member, like, first of all, like those teachers lounge sequences, whenever they are happen in the episode, those are some of the best scenes, or my favorite scenes, because everyone is so into their character that if they don't even say anything, I know what their opinion is about the topic that they're talking about. So that's funny that you say that, because it's sort of like, it's so defined individually from the writing, the directing, and the performance. And it also works simultaneously as a unit together, because the sort of rat-a-tat bouncing back and forth, that's some of the most exciting, hilarious stuff that the show does so well. And I don't think it works if the characters aren't defined as they are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think our old boss, Peter Roth, who used to be the head of Warner's TV for many, many, many years, he retired a couple years ago. He used to say that, like, you want to get to a point in a sitcom where there's a scene happening and one of your series regulars walks into that scene and people are laughing before they even start talking, because they know this character in that scene, in this situation, is immediately going to be funny. That's like what you shoot for. You want these characters so well defined that that you know how they're going to react to these situations. You're laughing before even the laugh line. And I think like that's sort of the goal, is to just define the way that we kind of looked at the first season is, we said to all the writers, is every episode, let's learn a little bit more about each person, even if it's one line where we fill it in. Let's fill it in. Let's not play the same note we played in 2. Let's play a tiny bit different in 3 and in 4 and in 5.
Okay. I do want to ask about the camera element. I think a lot of people have been talking about that, but I was curious. I don't think you guys, correct me if I'm wrong, have done like a mockumentary style show before, and I was curious if any of that was intimidating to you, or what was sort of the like learning curve of that extra layer. Just I think it's incredible about how the camera people on the set on Abbott are also that I learned are characters in the story, essentially, for how the characters react to them. I feel that feels different than every other sort of similar style show that I've seen. And I know Randall Einhorn, who is an amazing genius, he talked to me a little bit about that. But I was wondering, for you guys, is there anything that you were particularly like nervous about or eager to do with that?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the key to all of this, which is Randall. Obviously, he comes from a pretty storied background, to having been the original DP on The Office and directing a bunch of episodes of that, as well as Parks and Rec. And also, we have directors who have come in for the first and now second season who have a background like working on The Office, and the crew as well. Just that, our camera department they have like a reality show background. They're all kind of Randall's hires, and so I think it was a safety net. So I think I don't think that we were too nervous per se going into it, because Randall, like when he met with us the first time, he was like, I have a theory about all of this, and kind of explained the whole thing, and we were immediately felt like we were in good hands, and then we were like, okay, well, this guy's obviously is the guy. We found the guy,
Right.
And I think the only thing, a little like hitch, like, and it was really like during the pilot, was, we're used to like traditional coverage, right? Like we're used to anticipating, notes that we might get where be it from like the studio or the network being like, okay, on that like punchline, I want to see that on, I want to see both eyes of the character who's delivering that punchline. I want to see it in like a nice little close up. And that's not really the show that we're making. So, Randall and by extension us, like he convinced us that, we are going to treat this like it's real. And like, if a 3-camera crew couldn't shoot it in this way, we really aren't going to do it. Now, there are exceptions to that. If you notice in the pilot, there is a sequence where we follow Jacob and Janine up a staircase and into the teacher's lounge. And it's all done in like a oneer. And then Janine makes a joke about where she calls Jacob Ta-Nehisi quotes. And there is a cut there. And that is one of those times where it's like, okay, the crew couldn't have pulled that off. And it was one of those things where it's like, we shot it. It was all in a oneer. She delivered that with her head to, away from the camera, or face away from the camera. And then before we moved on, I was like, okay, I know this is like breaking our theory, but can we do a pickup on Janine's face? Because I think we're going to want to see that on her face. And then sure enough, like we got that note. And it was a good note. I think the joke plays better on our face. But that is one of the things where it's like, you don't notice it while you're watching it. But like, yeah, that's one of those things where it's like, it couldn't quite be pulled off if we were treating this with like absolute verisimilitude to what a documentary crew would do. But 99.9% of the stuff is all what a 3-camera crew could actually pull off if they were literally following them around. And that includes, the angles and things like that. So yeah, it was a little bit of a learning curve for us, but again, like in Randall, we trust, and he's proved himself like time and time again to be super trustworthy with this stuff.
Right.
The product speaks for itself. So yeah, it's we're not nervous anymore.
Okay, wonderful. I have to tell you that I cannot go on any form of social media, sort of, and actually now that I say it, it's sort of the same way with Abbott, without seeing people floored by Harley Quinn. That thing is all over my my Twitter feed. Nice. And I was curious, and what's like the best part of that, just because Harley Quinn is obviously one of the most beloved characters, and of course, like that's why like 8 different actresses have played her in the last, like, feels like 2 years. But I was curious, because it is animation and it is such a beloved character, what's your favorite part of seeing the sort of reaction?
Oh man, well, that show is also, when you talk about the little show that could, like, that show feels like that for us because it started out, the first 2 seasons were on DC Universe, which doesn't even exist anymore. And like, if every single person on DC Universe had watched the show, it would have been the smallest audience. Like, it was like, you couldn't even get it. And like, I'd tell family members to watch it and they'd be like, how? And so just to see it once it got on HBO Max, and to see like the response people have had to it, especially in the queer community, like, it's been amazing. I mean, that it's been, because like, we just wanted to make, we've been working in network TV for such a long time. So when that opportunity came to us, it was like, oh God, thank you. It was like the helicopters coming in to save us from the prison camp. we're like, okay, great. We'd love to do this. So it's been unbelievable to see the response to that show. It's blowing my mind. I wish I was more eloquent. Pat, you probably could say something better than I could.
No, I mean, it's the show migrating over to HBO Max, and HBO Max putting their, like, the full weight of that, their like marketing power and like raising the awareness has been like really palpable this season.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like they gave the show like a real big launch. Like, when I turned on HBO Max the other day, I opened the app and it was like the whole homepage was Harley, and I'm like, oh, okay, all right, so maybe we might get some new audience members now. Yeah, it's been super gratifying. Like, everything that Justin said, like, about the queer community really embracing it, has been super special. I think it's been interesting. Like, I think the show is kind of like an equal opportunity offender, and it also has weirdly been like it's like unexpectedly been, I think, embraced by like everyone. Like we will, take like pot shots at like the Snyder Cut fan base, and they have a really good sense of humor about it. There was like a long talk about like, should we do this? Is this going to be sort of too offensive? I got cold feet about it. When we were like explicitly like making fun of that sect of fandom, and then we ran it up the flagpole, and everybody was like, nah, it's funny, let's do it. Okay, all right. And then and I'm talking specifically about in season 2, the 2 dudes in the basement like commenting on the show and its wokeness, and but that group really embraced it. They turned like the t-shirt that character is wearing into like a shirt that you can buy, and all the money goes crazy to like suicide prevention hotline. Like they really like turned something that could have been received poorly into something really inspired. I mean, Harley's just kind of the gift that keeps on giving, and knock on wood that we get to keep doing it. I like our chances. I think it's doing pretty well, and certainly critically people have been into it this year. So I mean, especially this year it seems. So it's great. I love it.
You saying that a pot shot at the Snyderverse or the Snyder Cut, like I instinctively had like a physical reaction. I was like, oh no. Yeah.
We had an Easter egg this year with like, it was the air cut was in a folder on like the desktop of the Bat computer in the Bat cave, and I tweeted that out, and then people were just like, lighting fires, Schumacher, lighting fires. Like, but people love it. I was like, who knows if this inspires Warner Brothers to put out the air cut 5 years from now. I think our work is done.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you guys so much for your time. I want to say one last thing before I let you go, that I really enjoyed Powerless, and I had told a friend around the same time that show came out. We always joked, and I was like, what if there was a show that this is darker than Powerless? I was like, what if there was a show that was about the cleanup crew from The Purge? We always joke that there needs to be like a movie or a TV show about that. And then when I saw that Powerless was coming out, I was like, no, that's a lot better. That's a lot more, has a wider scope than the really dark, bloody version of a show that danced around in my head for.
I like your idea.
Yeah, I would watch that.
If I can get an executive producer credit, that's all I need. So that's take it. That's how it's done in Hollywood, right? You just ask for
and then the studios just give it.
Just give it. Yeah, that's exactly how it works. Well, thank you guys so much for your time. I love the show. I'm sure many more people may ask to reach a hand out to touch you as the show keeps going on and on.